My name's Mike Rowan. I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I've been singing with choirs, involved with choirs in many ways administratively, doing a little bit of directing, and even some composing at times. In college, I started to do a lot of arranging of music, arranging of popular music, and then later on I started to compose some of my own music. And this piece that the Community Chorus of Detroit is singing is an original composition that I wrote with a friend of mine when I lived in DC, singing in a choir. But it was on a trip to Detroit where I got the inspiration. I wanted to enter a composer competition, and I was going to ask a friend of mine to write the text. And I was on a trip home to visit my family, and I visited the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And there was an exhibit there about the sanitation workers' strike in Memphis in 1968. And this was the strike that, as part of the civil rights movement, brought Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to speak, where he gave the now famous "I've been to the mountaintop" speech. And on that trip, later after he gave the speech, was assassinated. And there is an exhibit in the Wright Museum where there are pictures of the sanitation workers striking, and they have the "I am a man" signs boldly across their chest. And this composer competition that I was entering happened to be for high school boys. And I thought this piece of history would be a really apt subject. And so that was the source of inspiration that I took back to my friend. The result was a beautiful piece of music. The text that my friend Yannick wrote was beautiful, was moving, was unexpected to me in a way that Yannick really told a story about, a younger child discovering his father's participation in this movement. It really brings like a story to life and kind of makes it feel like, it could be you, when you're reading the text. And it hit me, and I did my best to bring that to life in a way that I thought was kind of mysterious and ultimately inspiring. So now, fast forward a few years later, I'm a Detroit resident, and it feels very neat to kind of be back in the city and hear this piece being performed in Detroit that had its creative origins outside before that, when I was kind of away from Michigan. And so it's really neat. So I had a deadline, so that helped spur, I think, some creativity and moving this in a direction, since I was writing it for a competition that I had to submit. And I sat down at the piano and just tried to start with a melody. And in the course of doing that, I also kind of leaned into my contemporary a cappella background in sort of composing some of like the surrounding structure of the piece. And so if any of you listening have sang in an a cappella group or done doo-wop or covers, something like that. Maybe you'll hear like a little bit of that sprinkled in as the piece begins. But the melody, I think, the melody that came forth, I think, at least I tried to have it carry through the momentum of the words. And there's a beautiful rhythm to the text. And so I hope that the melody kind of paints that picture of taking the listeners through the story. Well, I got to hear the piece for the first time when I was part of performing it. Both Yannick and I sang in a group in Washington, D.C. called the 18th Street Singers. And I was feeling energized even before we sang the first note, because Yannick and I introduced the piece to the audience beforehand. And again, he scripted it, so he has a gift with words. And the audience maybe even gave some whoops or, some applause, that sort of thing. This will be the fourth time that I've heard the piece performed, but only the second time that I've been able to be an audience member. And it'll be the first time in Michigan that I'll be listening as an audience member. Hope would be that you can almost put yourself in that story. I think that is what the text is trying to do. And so I, as a composer, was trying to do that as well. And on top of that, realize that we can write ourselves into these stories in history, and what we do has an impact on the future.